Welcome to the Deep Six podcast, where we make a generational impact on you and yours. What we do here is explore a 6-point model into your health, your life, and your journey while you're here. So let's dive deep and help you thrive, not just survive. Hello. Good day. Hope you're well out there, and this enlightens you and makes you even better. Dr. Lewerenz here at the Deep Six podcast, and man, I'm so excited because I have a good friend, a colleague, and somebody that I've really known for, I think, probably close to 15 years. And he joins us from the other side of the country, from California, from San Diego. And it's a mentor, but also highly educated and trained and sought after, Dr. Nick Delgado. So Nick, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. And, we're in Costa Mesa, California, about an hour north of San Diego. I think close. A little nicer, Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, but it's all good because, when you're talking about health and well-being, they think us on the West Coast, we have no stress. We just sit on the rocks and look at the ocean and kind of meditate and rock,
You don't?
I guess not. I don't know, man.
That's awesome. Love it. Well, you always look great, by the way. And I see you're staying in shape and, living what you preach. So I love that, man. That's awesome.
The only beef I've got, Dr. Lewerenz, is Michigan took it to our USC boys and, by 3 points there. What a heck of a game. And Harbaugh, we took your coach and, your guy took it to us. It's like interesting.
Well,
and then our Chargers lost too.
Yeah. I'm not going to apologize too much because it's usually the opposite, But hey,
I don't spend time watching games, but I get the tail end of it, right?
It's just you see the result or you see exactly. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, let me do a little intro just so everybody knows about you. And I'm probably, because I actually made a joke, but I was kind of being serious. If I read all your credentials and if I read everything in your background, we would have like 5 minutes left for the show. So I know you've been I'll just say in the longevity, anti-aging, nutrition, exercise, professional sports realm for, 40, 50 years? At least
46 years.
Yeah. So, but let me just do you some justice here. So I know you have your postdoctorate from University of Southern California. You also University of Long Beach. You have some postgraduate education, Loma Linda University. You are also USC Professional School Dean's List 4 times. You're have all this global presentation. On your website, I didn't even realize. You've actually spoke, in Japan and France and Spain and Germany and the UK and Canada and. You spoke around the world. That doesn't shock me. That's how we actually met about 15 years ago. But your journey to me is really what's interesting, but I do want to say, I know your certifications, your American Board of Anti-Aging Health Practitioners, cardiovascular ultrasound technologies, hematology, energy medicine, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, functional medicine, lifestyle medicine. And of course you have your PhD. So again, I'm going to end all that. But you are well sought after and well educated and very knowledgeable. And what always impresses me is forward thinkers and not being married to what they know, but what they don't know, and so you just keep on growing and learning. And I love that.
When you're pursuing a challenge as big as the nature of aging, and we all face life and death at a high scale, you have to really go beyond what anyone else before has thought about or considered. And I think in that realm, you and I came together with a deep fascination at looking at people's cellular health under a microscope. And I actually have a picture of my blood under a high-powered microscope right here. I like to patch these things in when I do streams because it's funny, but a lot of my guests, I'll have them, with their permission, I say, hey, let's take a look at your blood. I had Dr. Ed Park in my studio Tuesday, and he wrote a book on exosomes and stem cells and peptides, and he was on Mark Harmon's show. And so kind of, he was a little nervous. He says, I said, well, we'll show it. We'll decide
Yeah.
if we're going to show it or not. And he says, hey, by the way, your blood looks good, Ed. It looks good. And he was, oh, shoo, oh my gosh, and
Yeah.
the test, it's the immediate biofeedback. You're looking at that inner universe. And not only are you looking at not just the red cells, the white cells, the immune system, the terrain, the background, and we're learning so much more about the gut and the influence of the immune system, and particularly, with all the things that have gone on in the recent 4 years, right? So I think when I wrote the book, Blood Doesn't Lie, it caused me to go a deeper dive. And now I'm looking at the kind of the microbiology, the plaques, the inner universe, the teeth. When you scrape them and you put it under a phase contrast microscope, you're seeing Borrelia, spirochetes, you're seeing various types of microbes. And it's kind of that ratio of anaerobic, those nasty bacteria that live without oxygen, aerobic, the good bacteria, and probiotics. So, for me, it's just perpetual examination. But the best thing is you and I have is when you show a patient their own blood
Amen.
and their own microbes and their own dry oxidative stress, you've got their 100% attention.
Yes.
And for the first time, you have a tool to kind of steer them and go, hey, by the way, I think you need to start doing this. And they'll listen to you and they'll usually comply. Isn't that your experience?
Oh, 100%. And actually, it's funny that you jumped right into live blood, because you probably don't recall this, but this is actually how we met. And I was at the American Academy of Anti-Aging. I don't know exactly which year, but, probably about 14, 15 years ago. And you had in a booth, at one of the, presentations, if you will. And I know you're speaking there, and you had, the big screen, and you had your scopes and all this stuff. And, here I'm coming in to do some coursework and, see what's happening with all the vendors, et cetera. And you caught my eye. So I go in there, and exactly what you just showed up on the screen, your blood you had, and you said, oh, hey doc, hey. And that's when we met, and you sat me down and you looked at my blood. And it blew my mind. And what blew my mind was because you're looking at it in real time. It's so impactful to see your own blood and then obviously be explained what's happening. And literally today, I got to tell you how powerful it is. And
Yes.
you're the teacher of me. You're the mentor of me with this. And I've used it in my practice now for roughly 14, 15 years with 7 practitioners, thousands and thousands of patients. So this is your impact, just to share with you. And I will tell you, it is so powerful to see your own blood under a microscope, understand what's going on at the gut, nutrition, the microbiome, your lipids, all the things we see, and then dry blood that can, reflect inflammation and hormones and et cetera. And what's so amazing is it's a tool that creates them one understanding, and then very powerful, to lead them somewhere. When people understand, they're more compliant. And they get excited about it. And I can't tell you. So I thank you, by the way. Thank you very much for teaching me.
Of course.
And taking me under your wing. But I mean, it's just so powerful, and it's so real, and it's in real time. We use it, I get my scopes from you. So we use it every day, multiple times a day with many, many patients, thousands of patients a year. And when and I've had somebody recently tell me this, they said, well, what do you say about, this is be a patient, they'll say, well, isn't that a little bit of quackery and all that? And I say, well, it's your blood, it's cytology, it's morphology of your blood. And we've used this in medicine for how long? 50s, 100
over 100
years?
years.
Yeah.
Merck's manual has a whole chapter on blood hematology and blood morphology.
Yeah. And what's crazy is we're not using it in my practice. I'm not really diagnosing somebody. I'm educating them, and I'm leading them down paths with it and empowering them with the visual. Okay. But it never lies. I always say this, the blood, right? Blood never lies,
Right.
And so literally it's such a powerful tool. And when that patient that actually asked me that, I said, you tell me what you think of it after we do an exam, and I explained some things and explained her history. And this person had allergies, food sensitivities, bloat, digest. So simple stuff that we deal with every day. Right.
Right.
But literally it helped her understand the concept of things like leaky gut and candida and all that. So thank you, by the way.
And Dr. Lewerenz, to put it into perspective, consider that I've been looking at people's blood for 46 years, including going to most major conventions, anti-aging conventions, South Africa, Japan, all over the world, oftentimes voted the best speaker at events. And indeed, when I'm going to a deep dive, one of my biggest move away from a psychological perspective is being embarrassed in front of a live public audience, right? So I overstudy. I really make sure I'm just expecting that big question from the audience, from Dr. X and a urologist or a hematologist or someone. And the interesting thing is these doctors trained in hematology who
Right.
actually have their board certification in the examination of blood. They confide and lean forward to me when I'm looking at their blood, and they say, we're used to looking at dry stains. We're literally not trained to do what you're doing. You are doing something so novel, so unique, so advanced that I believe it will be, to your point of one of your future questions, part of the future of all medicine. Every doctor's office, it's going to be
Wow.
mandatory. Because I don't know about you, but I'd be insecure if I just looked at the chemistries, the liver kidney panels, the lipids, and even if I had the hormones, I still would be missing that one perspective, right?
For sure.
And
Absolutely.
full disclosure, the dry oxidative stress is also another. That's a little bit of a leap of faith. I mean, it's been observed for 75 years. Heaton and Lagarde, the actual physicians of President Eisenhower, had discovered that when blood dries under a without a cover slip on a slide, it forms patterns. And much like it's been told to me that iridology, Dr. Bernard Jensen, who was the researcher in that area looking in the eyes, and now we're learning all these things about the eyes and the embryology, the initial cells that start from the center and emanate outward. So we think something to do with the center of the drop emanates outward. It's almost like a fingerprint. When you're looking at that
Right.
dry blood, if you have 10 people in the room, you could almost check all 10 of them and then a month later check all 10 and almost know whose blood was who. I
For
mean,
sure.
it's
Yeah.
very interesting. And that's kind of interesting from a dry perspective. But we're seeing oxidative stress, free radical damage. Everyone talks about free radical damage. They talk about antioxidants, but here's a chance to see it. And I
Exactly.
don't know about you, but I've looked at people so chronic that maybe a loving relative brought them in to see me as a last chance effort. And a day before they passed away, literally, because I know I'd call the next day, see, how are you doing? I just gave you a plan. How, what are we going to do next? And I find out they passed away. And I see massive holes of oxidative stress in the blood. And so we
Mhm.
know there's a gradient of perfect blood. And you and I occasionally, I think it's 1 in 1,000, you see someone with perfect blood. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
oftentimes they're
Well, yeah. Yourself,
exercising.
just yourself.
They're exercising consistently. Well, it holds me to a high standard. I
Yeah. You
know what I
should.
have
Yeah.
to do to get
Right.
that standard of high blood. I was just listening to Peter Attia, and he's talking about longevity book he wrote, and he's saying that when he's trying to tease out, is diet important, is exercise important, he says bar none, exercise is absolutely the most important. I will lean into that conversation and say that exercise does cover up a lot of evils and ills that a person subjects themselves to. True story. I get that. I've
Yeah.
seen really nice looking blood in people who exercise chronically and consistently and routinely. And I'm one of them. I love to
Yeah.
exercise, but I've got it down to a science where I can do my 12-minute workout, very high intensity. It's not hit. And you and I had a conversation in our last interview at
Yeah.
Las Vegas.
In Las Vegas.
I
Yeah.
think when you get to really great shape, you don't need to rest between sets, and you just carry through all 12 minutes, zero rest, and your heart rate's going at about 180, 190. And for a guy my age turning 70, pushing the heart rate up towards 200, there's even upper limits of max VO2. And I'm up at that limit going, hey, my heart's working better than most hearts of any age, right?
Yep.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that there's some truth to exercise initially causes more free radical damage, and then the body becomes more efficient and starts clearing the oxidative stress and free radical damage. But that doesn't make up for the lipids and postprandial. The beauty of what you're doing in live blood, Dr. Lorenz, is you're catching them in the middle of the day, literally after they've eaten something that is probably what they normally eat. And
Right.
fasting is an artificial state, and it doesn't always show what people need to know. And Peter Attia is not leaning into or acknowledging that. He's saying,
Yeah.
lipids and glucose and these things, and the foods that you eat, there's a teaspoon of sugar in the blood. So what do you say to that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you're spot on, and I think you can't stress enough about diet. And both of us, where exercise and, workout, if you will, or some bandwidth of that, fiends, if you will. I mean, I'd love you to talk a little bit about your exercise history and your weightlifting history, because it is impressive,
Sure.
especially at your age. And I found myself just innately, like you mentioned about exercise. So, I exercise at least 5 days a week, probably 6. I do have sometimes a recovery day. I'm also,
Yep.
going hard at the office and, life and family and stuff like that. But I have noticed, though, what you just, spoke about, where when you're in shape, you don't necessarily need the hit or the high chronic. I shouldn't say hit, because it is a form of hit, like you said, your 12 minutes, but this marathon, this excessive high heart rate for 45 minutes, or these intervals for 45 minutes or an hour, are almost unnecessary. Actually, I find, by the way, that there's more in my patients, and even in myself in the past, which could be slightly a little bit aging, but it's not, you don't get enough recovery and enough balance, and it's unneeded and unnecessary to maintain. And, but I don't want to went off a little topic there from what you brought up or asked, because I think that you got to lean into the diet. And I know we'll get into that in a bit, but the diet's just so key.
Let's circle back to the 3 forms of fitness that I do to make me a world champion. Even to this day, I can compete at record levels, believe it or not. I challenge guys routinely, $1,000 cash if you can beat me in my sport fairly, but curl and press or curls nonstop. And
you've challenged me before, and I won't do it. Right?
But you know what? The fun thing is that we all know our standard, our personal best, right? We talk about PBs, personal best, and yet these performances are usually based on single lifts. So the 3 forms of exercise I do, in which I participated in yesterday morning, was yoga. I love to get in a yoga studio, not by myself with a video playing and things, but with a bunch of hot young ladies and a few guys, and we're all stretching and moving, and you're seeing them able to do certain moves that sometimes I can't do. Some of them have fabulous balance, and it really reinforces, hey, Dr. Nick, you got to work on that. That balance is a earmark of, they talk about grip strength and movement and balance. And, one of the risks of death is falling, right, as you get older.
Yeah,
and my mother is turning 90 in October. And I got to say, she works 40, 50 hours a week. She's sharp as a tack. She handles our customer service. Oftentimes when people call in the morning, it's my mother, Beatrice, taking the call.
Love it.
Yeah. So, I think keeping the mind sharp, but you know what? That exercise, number 1, yoga, but I don't put it in prioritize. I slip in yoga almost like a therapeutic chiropractor visit. For me, it kind of realigns the body and gets my flow, balance left, right, hemispheres and the whole thing. Number 2 is my favorite, is where I train with a partner. And instead of waiting to the 8th or 9th rep where you reach what they call muscular failure, I call it muscular achievement. And so when I reach that point where my arms are feeling rubbery and I can't move the weight another moment, we start that process because the muscles are 40% stronger on the eccentric contraction. We start that process when you're fresh from the very first rep. So you're max out, balls out, rep 1 through 5, you're hitting intensities that you've never hit before. And by the 7th, 8th, 9th, your muscles are just going, okay, we're done. Electrolytes are depleted. The muscular myosin, the contractions are done. And that electrical ability, the muscle just hits literally temporary muscular achievement, I call it, right?
Yeah.
And then brief 2-hour period to recover for that muscle, but there's a 24 to 48 hour recovery of the whole body. But then what I do is I align the 8 muscle groups of the body and I go 1 set per muscle group and I go to muscular achievement, all 8 muscle groups. So I do my entire body in 1 session of 12 minutes. Imagine I'm getting my cardio, my full body training. I don't split the back and the chest and the arms. If you're a bodybuilder, that's great and wonderful. But if you're
Yeah,
into
sure.
longevity and peak performance, then you need to try my system, because it will tax you beyond anything you've ever done. And to your point, recovery is a B. It is tough. And
Yeah.
once you get to that point of recovery, you're going to see your blood transform. You're going to have less oxidative stress. Your blood is so oxygenated, EPO, erythropoietin's releasing. You're producing more red blood cells. Your body's under demand, fight or flight. And then it finally says, oh, this guy's going to keep fighting. We better up the ante. So you'll find that initially your strength starts going down with the exact weight you're using each set, each rep, going into each week. And then all of a sudden there's this huge peak. And we found that with the Russians and Bulgarians. Some of the strongest men in the world described this phenomena. Then I only do 3 workouts a week of 12 minutes. So imagine that's only 36 minutes, Dr. Lewerenz, 36 minutes besides my maybe 3 hours of yoga. And then on the weekend, I do a flow training, nonstop lifting for an hour, where I'll take my dumbbells and I'll lift looking up at the moon or the sun, and I'll breathe through my nose for 1 hour nonstop. Now, sometimes I'll pyramid if the weight's feeling a little too heavy or too light. I have power blocks and I change the weight with no rest. And I do that routine at a heart rate of somewhere between 180 and 190 for a full hour. Wow, so that's about 1 or 2 sessions. So there it is, 5 times a week. And less than 5 hours of training a week, less than maybe 3 hours.
And I love one thing I got to point out that I love that you're sharing is this, if you will, this full body, not just workout, but also balance. So what I mean is you're getting, with the yoga, you're getting flexibility, you're working on your balance, you're working on your cerebellum for, things like you said, like, so, as we age, we don't fall. You got strength going on, you got your VO2 max, your cardiac going on. I mean, all these are so important with aging.
And your lymphatics are stimulated to the max.
Yeah.
10-fold the lymphatics are stimulating, because lymphatic system doesn't have its own heart to pump it. It's the muscles that pump the lymphatics and stimulates and improves the immune system 10-fold. It's insane how much your immunity improves. Now, the only reason to know when you've exercised too much during the course of a week or a month or a year, you check your morning pulse rate. And if it's not at that nice, sweet 40 to 60, 70, whatever your genetic predisposed resting pulse rate, and it's all of a sudden 120 or 130, take that day off.
100%. Yeah, I teach my patients that often. When you know you're overtaxed, you're overtraining, you got to check your morning heart rate and know. And people that are driven, I take care of a lot of entrepreneurs and businessmen, and often what happens is their frontal lobe, their brain wired to this. Well, I'm just going to train. I'm just going to work out. It's my stress reliever. And they end up sick. They end up calling me because they got a respiratory infection, or they're run down, or they're like sleeping 14 hours a day. And it's very common. I tell you, that's one of the first things you got to do that if you're doing too much. But hey, let me I want to back you up just a little bit. Sorry. But
it's all good.
This is key to me because it's impressive, and so people know. Tell me, because it was in your 20s. So Dr. Nick Delgado, PhD, didn't exist. Okay. In your 20s, you were not what you are now. So will you please briefly share with us kind of your journey and how in your 20s to 30s, what caused and what kind of got you on this health road, longevity, expertise road and educating all of us?
Yeah, I was playing Pop Warner football. I was a first a lineman, and then all the guys got bigger than me. So then I became a fullback and a linebacker, and I wanted to bulk up. So I was weighing in after Pop Warner. I had always had to cut weight to make weigh-ins. But in freshman year of high school, the coach wanted to make a freshman ball, and I had to make 160, and I was weighing 169. And I told him, no, I'm not going to cut weight, because I cut weight so much during Pop Warner. I just thought it wasn't that I wasn't disciplined, couldn't do it. I could have done it in a heartbeat, but it was a philosophy that I would never starve myself ever again to make weight, because that's not the way you should make weight. And I think people need to be aware, all these UFCs and things where they have to dehydrate, they're losing weight in a very dangerous way. And it shouldn't be that way. Your walk around weight, like Lee Haney, 8-time Mr. Olympiad, takes in 500 grams of complex carbohydrates a day, 80 grams of protein. He's very clear that carbohydrates the complex have a protein sparing effect. So you don't have to load up on protein as you get older, contrary to popular belief. That's a huge myth. And I want to break that, because the biggest risk we have in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th decade, and I've mentored people like Ray Wilson in their 90s, and that is that we have muscle atrophy to face. And it's a serious problem, because if we can't walk up the stairs, we can't get up out of the chair, our grip strength is weak, we're not far from the grave. So we really have to then figure out.
Right? Studies show that.
Yeah.
VO2 max and strength.
Exactly. So we have to look at how do we sustain that phenomenal energy, but learn how to recover elegantly as we age. And I would lend to you the foods that you eat. And the fact that I nibble through the day, I have a sack of grapes here. I carry a packaged food. I've never left my home in 45 years, with the exception of 6 times I can remember, where I didn't have my full packaged foods in glass containers of whole, natural, plant-based foods, oil-free. I didn't say fat-free, because I do have soap, nuts, seeds, avocados, and olives, and I eat those for brain health and so forth. And I'll rub olive oil on my skin, but I don't take it into my diet through my food cooking. So myself, I've chosen to go from one extreme, where I was on a high protein diet, had a stroke when I was age 21, and I was obese. I had high blood pressure for 4 years on blood pressure medications, to this point now where my blood pressure is better than anyone 20 or 30 or 40 years old. And my resting heart rate, my cardiovascular system, all test out to be that of years younger than I am. So Brian Johnson, you have a competitor who I'm in 50 years will be the oldest living, healthiest person in history. He's 50 something. He's going to have a hard time making 100, because he's doing certain things that I agree with and certain things I disagree. Sleep, I completely agree with him. Get to bed early, wake up without an alarm. And that's critical, right?
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Absolutely. What do you think of, the light, the first morning light, getting sun in your eyes, and even, guys like me in Michigan, these light boxes when you first wake up, even waking up naturally?
Circadian rhythm is critical. And if you're off on your circadian rhythm, especially if you're a nighttime worker, it's really challenging. And we do know that the cortisol level increases when there's at least 50,000 lux of energy, and even the outdoor daylight. It doesn't have to be a sunny day. It's just out in the clouds. You're going to start setting that clock. And then towards sunset, I do my training oftentimes, go to the beach with my dumbbells as the sun's setting, and I'm watching the sunset. And for me, it's keeping my mind and body correct about my hormonal cycle. Melatonin high at night, cortisol higher during the day. Cortisol drops at night, melatonin increases, of course. So that rhythm is critical. And we know that testosterone increases 69% in the presence of the daylight, particularly intense daylight, exposed to, if you will, the more polite areas of the body. We're not allowed to run around naked like maybe our primitive relatives, but sunlight on the body is important. If you get to the beach, please go enjoy, jump in the ocean, have a good time.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. We get that only, 4 or 5 months a year, but I love it. But
Right.
hey, since you're on this, and I want to definitely get into this, because it's such a, big, one, your own personal journey, but also just your expertise in longevity and anti-aging and that, and, the hormones, the gut, the diet, the nutrition, the exercise. So now that we've covered some of that, shed some light for us, just on some of the big stuff that you've experienced in the past, but also kind of what you think is really cutting edge and going on right now in the future with longevity and anti-aging medicine, some key points.
Okay, some key points. I think for far too long, we've ignored the mind-body connection. And the brain dictates 98% of our decisions are made subconsciously. And yet the truth is, we as humans can actually get away from the TV media, the advertising billboards, the clicks on your phone, and we can program ourselves to do exactly what we want to do to have a happier, better quality life. And the biggest problem I see in people say, I don't have time to exercise. Really? Okay, so try my 12-minute workout. Now you tell me you don't have time to exercise. Okay, I'm not getting in shape. Really? In 12 minutes, 3 times a week, you're going to get in phenomenal shape. Okay, I'm too old to exercise. Really? You're too old? You're too old because you don't exercise. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
you say, well, I'm too overweight. Well, you're too overweight because you keep telling yourself you're overweight, and you've got to have a consistent model where you get used to eating a big bowl of vegetable soup, a big bowl of vegetable fruit, fruits and vegetables, that is. And even Peter Attia admitted you could eat potatoes all day long and lose weight to the exclusion of high calorie meat and high density fat foods, but it wouldn't necessarily be a healthy diet to eat only potatoes. I get that. So what I look at is, how do you merge what I call the 7 secrets to look and feel great forever? So that's detoxification. That gets back to infrared spa. It gets back to the red light therapy. It gets back to CVAC or hyperbaric oxygen. I like CVAC, altitude and conditioning. We have a few training centers here near Orange County in my office. And the truth is that when you stimulate the mind and the body, but you use BrainTap just asked me to submit documents and information and recordings because I am highly trained in hypnosis, timeline therapy, and NLP. So this deep trance phenomena goes deep rooted: anger, fear, guilt. These things repeat often, and those people are addicted to either alcohol, drugs, or food, or they're really trying to make excuses for not putting out their best performance in work. And so these things are fear of, and you've got to let go of that fear and be prepared to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. Any great scientist, athlete, or coach has known that some of their greatest achievements came after the biggest failures. Now, wisdom has it that you'll look at other people's mistakes and not repeat those, but humans tend to be a little confused. So that's where guided imagery comes in. So I listen to about 8 minutes worth to 12 minutes of guided imagery when I wake up in the morning, to my own voice or to other practitioners, and at bedtime. So I'm programming mine instead of looking at TikTok and scrolling and seeing these crazy things and Facebook and things. I'm programming my mind to what I want to accomplish, and I'm planning my whole week ahead. I'm going to commit to doing that Audible book this week. I'm going to commit to writing a paragraph each morning. I'm going to do a podcast with Dr. James Lewerenz. I have a huge event tomorrow for everyyoungevent.com, a 5-hour immersion course with Dr. Michael Grossman coming to talk about hormones. So when you mentioned, to your point about hormones, I'm a fanatic about balancing hormones. When I first knew that the mother of my child, when she passed away 10 days after my son was born 30 years ago due to hyperthyroidism and congestive heart failure complications of the birth and so forth, I realized there was this big gap that I had no clue about hormones, nor did most doctors. And most doctors, the most they knew about hormones was maybe prescribing a little estrogen or a little bit of Synthroid, a synthetic T4. And they had no clue about the orchestra of hormones. So you and I know, if you test saliva, blood, urine, you check the various points and compare that to youthful people, not just people you're 40,
optimal,
50, 60,
optimal.
70. Because my goal is to dial that clock back to that of a 20, 30-year-old. You and I got to interview Dr. Jeffrey Life, a fantastic interview, right? And here's a guy, 85, 86, and he walks his talk. He's balancing his hormones, using peptides, working out with weights. He has love and connection in his life. He detoxifies. I mean, perfect example of a guy who actually suffered from coronary heart disease and was at risk to die due to stress and improper eating. And he turned that all around, right?
Turn it all
so
around, yeah.
What do you say to that?
No, I love that, and I love that interview. And he's a great man, great motivator, especially like because in a real like, you know, we all kind of had impact, like yourself in your 20s with your stroke, and him with, you know, heart attack and I believe even bypass, if I recall right, and then totally corrected his hormones, corrected his nutrition, you know, become an exercise fanatic, and you know, built this then longevity practice because of how he lived. And you know, myself, I had some health journey that's on my website and stuff that I suffered from adrenal, which is a hormonal issue. And that's what got me on this path and got me motivated with not just treating patients, but making them and helping them and guide them thriving. Everything you said is spot on. What I notice that is so important is this: people will often, and physicians and practitioners not in this space, will discount hormones. And they're such a powerful tool, not just in anti-aging and longevity, but in helping quality of life and getting actionable, getting energy. So meaning, how do you motivate somebody, if their hormones are imbalanced, to lose weight, and tell them to eat right, and yet their brain is, not into it. Their mood is not into it. They're not have a good libido, meaning they don't even have interest in sex or, intimacy, and they don't feel love or they don't receive love. Hormones are so critical to be actionable. So that's what I notice. And it's really all of them. It's like a dance of these hormones in balance. And so you do have to appreciate all of them, as you know, and I know you experience and you've educated me on in the past. And I will tell you, in my practice, it's one of the most, when needed, again, because we're just optimizing. We're setting patients back to, like you said, their 20s and 30s. But when you're optimal, you thrive, and then real traction can happen. Real traction can happen in your life, whether it's mental, spiritual, physical, emotional, you name it. And that's what I really, really notice.
And I think that in terms of the future of medicine, we really have to also embrace that we'll probably look back and think it was rather barbaric that people had to depend on surgery to correct problems, or big pharma drugs that may work temporarily, but were never intended to be used ongoing on a chronic basis. So I think what we're really looking at, and to your point about using the microscope, I've been blessed to have tested people no less than Brian Tracy, Mark Victor Hansen, Tony Robbins, some of the superstars in athletics, and looking at almost every doctor's name you could think of in anti-aging health and wellness. So, it helps us to elevate to see what is the standard that we can set, the highest standard possible. And then instead of shooting for that lowest denominator, and then look at, okay, why don't we just rethink how we've been doing medicine? Maybe we should consider stem cells, regenerative medicine. You and I had a conversation a few months ago, and I've come across one of the best sources that I've been searching for 20 years. And the laboratory finally opened up, said, we're going to work with you. We're going to go direct with you and do some incredible work. We can get up to about 1.6 trillion exosomes with Wharton's jelly and stem cells. And of course, we can't market or advertise that, but we can talk about who is a candidate in our practice to receive something that we can always schedule that surgery. It can always take place. I'll never forget the number of people I've helped that said, look, I'm scheduled for surgery. And I said, well, you know what? Let's try these steps. Let's do these interventions.
You said something, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want you to just, because this is a question I get all the time. And when people bring up about stem cells and they're like, hey, doc, what do you think? Why don't you do these more? Why don't you offer them and all that? And I'm not against them at all. I want to stress that. But what's interesting is that you said this, and I explained this to them, but share with our audience about how it's how you receive them, who's appropriate for them. So what does that mean when somebody's appropriate to receive stem cells?
There's probably an ongoing discussion that those people with cancer should be contraindication, maybe not someone that should receive stem cells. There are some people in the field that say, well, stem cells actually might rejuvenate. But keep in mind, there's an interesting factor with cancer. Cancer has what's called cancer stem cells. And so these rogue cells start multiplying, and no matter what amount of chemotherapy, radiation, the tumor shrinks, but these cancer stem cells continue to grow. And sometimes they're aggravated and grow faster. So we would probably want to be careful. I would just simply say, let's get that cancer under control. And you say, well, what do you mean under control? They got to do chemo and radiation. Really? Now, wait a minute. Let's step back a moment. Is the best healing mode of the body, is it gut health? Is it whole natural foods that don't feed the cancer but help the cancer slow down? Is it exercise, proper rest and sleep, and love and connection? I mean, I look at Dr. Lorraine Day. She did pass away a few years ago, but she reached 86 and was diagnosed with cancer throughout her body. And here she was in, I believe, her 30s or 40s, but she lived a full life and cancer-free after that diagnosis, applying these principles. So I think that there are maybe small numbers, because a vast majority of people get fearful when they hear that word cancer. And instead of looking at estrogen dominance, looking at ester block, DIM, dinyl-methane, indole-3-carbinol, calcium diglucarate, things that help shunt that 4-hydroxyestrone, which is a known carcinogen related to prostate and breast cancer. So my newest book coming out is all about estrogen dominance. I just got back from the bioidentical hormone replacement conference here for 3 days, and I just kind of refined and updated my original draft that I wrote 21 years ago, and I'm ready to release that book. And the point is that I think that cancer has a risk related to hormonal imbalances. And then
Amen.
once we treat
For sure.
that, the stem cells could be looked at, the stem cells. But I would do TPE, therapeutic plasma exchange, pull out 2 liters of this junk plasma that has 97% of the chemicals and toxins and plastics we've been exposed to. And then when the body's clean a week later, go ahead and do the stem cell treatment. Now, some would argue I want to do bone marrow stem cells. I want to do cord blood. I want to do peripheral. I want to do fat stem cell derived. I have my opinions about it. I wrote one of the early books for doctors only about stem cells back. If you looked at the publication date, it would blow your mind that I've been doing this many years, before most people. This is 2010 copyright, but the original text. So that was 14 years ago. I was doing my thesis and work and doing people, whereas California had allocated, I think it was $4 billion, and they only studied animals. They didn't even do one human patient with stem cells. We had done 7,000 cases with stem cell treatments. So without any adverse effects. So I look at that history and I go, listen, more and more doctors starting to become open, but beware of your source, because some people are doing less than ideal. They're not following GMP. The quality of the lab standards aren't there. Some people can get infections. There can be some bad interventions. So you really have to follow good protocols.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. And I definitely see that. And I have a number of patients that even will go, down by you, go to Mexico, just and to good quality clinics and that. And because they're getting the real stuff, they're getting the best stuff, and they should. But it's an interesting place, especially, we're behind you than the West Coast. Michigan, we're a little bit, things come here about a year or two later. But what's interesting is that people will often still reflect on them as, and they could have many other things that they need to improve upon, meaning their weight, their diet, their exercise, hormonal balance, nutrition, all of these things haven't even been addressed, but they'll have a bad knee and want stem cells. I often find that if we optimize, just like my podcast here, the Deep Six is a 6-point model of deep diving into many things. And when we optimize those, all of a sudden their degeneration or their thing that they might be thinking they need stem cells for, maybe, it's questionable.
Yeah. And I think that it's much like those people that come to us who want to get their hormones ramped up and they want to do testosterone pellets or DHEA or, balance out their adrenals. You really have to do a certain order of importance. Correct the adrenals, make sure they're functioning well. Be sure that you're following the lifestyle modes of getting outdoor sunlight and exercise and sleep and rest and reducing stress by, handling, I'll just call it guided imagery. People are afraid of the word hypnosis because they've seen stage hypnosis. They don't understand we can communicate with the subconscious mind very directly and really help to make these things come into action. So, for example, when people do affirmations, Dr. Lewerenz, they'll look in the mirror and say, I'm in great shape and I'm worth $1 million. And their mind's going, bullshit, you're not in great shape. You're 40 pounds overweight and you got $10 in your bank account. And the truth is, you have to word it very accordingly because the brain is listening. So you go, I'm en route to getting in great shape. I'm attracting the practitioners and the therapists and trainers to help me to be on track to eat the whole natural foods on a daily basis, letting go of the foods that cause me. People say, well, I don't know how to lose weight. Design a program. Well, you know how to gain weight. You ate all those things that cause you to gain weight. So it's being consistent with eating the right foods that will help you to get in shape. The consistency of a simple starting exercise program. Just set your mind that 12 minutes truly is enough. And you're just not in shape to do 12 minutes at the level I do, but that's okay. You'll work up to it. And over the course of the year, that what they call flow training, the consistency gets you in fabulous shape. And then your body starts detoxifying the aches and pains. And plus, I wear barefoot shoes. I don't wear shoes with soles. There's a proof that we were probably came to this world barefoot and maybe had little wraps around our feet for rocks and things. But the truth is that those soles throw our whole stature off, our knees or hips or ankles. So I do these things like yoga and barefoot running, and I do certain exercises that keep my body. And I use a vibra massage that I learned from Dr. James Stockton out of Chicago. And it's this high powered vibrator, and I take it over any inflamed areas or sore areas. And I did this with Brian Tracy with the guidance of Dr. Stockton, and all his dark blackened flesh turned pink and healthy. It was like amazing. And he was on opiates to control the pain after multiple surgeries. And here you think about, everyone wants to run out and do surgery, but there's corrective measures that go beyond surgery. You probably don't need surgery. You probably need stem cells after you've gotten the body really in balance. And that can happen rather quickly, right, Dr. Lewerenz? The 6-point model, you take people as fast as they're ready to go, right?
Yep, absolutely. And you said something that I love. We talk about here all the time, and there's different forms of it. Like you're using a word like guided imagery, which is perfect. I tell my patients this all the time. We set goals. I have them use and create credos and their core values, and to think of those, to visualize those, and to put things into action based on those first thing in the morning. And also, usually I tell them it's a Sunday, but I say every week, set the tone with what your goals are for that week. And whether it's literally something with their relationships, whether it's something with work, whether it's something they're, creatively working on, their fitness program, their whatever, but they also, and I love what you said because it's so true, is the mind is so powerful to just visualize it, see it, okay, and then start an actionable, because the process to get there is what I call professionalism. People want the result right away, right? We think of the result,
Right.
but really true professionals they're hooked on, and they love the process, right?
Right. So to your point, in my new guided imagery production that comes with attending my Forever Young event course.com. It's just foreveryoungevent.com. And you can register and actually get the virtual stream depending on when this airs. We do them about once every quarter. And this immersion includes scripts where people read these scripts that are worded appropriately to bypass what's called critical thinking. Because if someone says, I just don't want to gain weight, the mind skips the don't, says, I just want to gain weight. And so people don't understand. You have to communicate, because no one's really ever taught you how to communicate with the subconscious mind. And Milton Erickson, Virginia Satir, Richard Bandler, all these people who trained directly or indirectly me, I was able to, my undergraduate degree in psychology, and then go work with some of the great trainers in the world and educators and mentors. I realized that would make or break me with each decade of age was how consistent I was about conditioning the very things that were toughest for me, the things that I felt I was kind of avoiding. Oh, I don't think I can do this. It's my 16th book. Who are you to write 16 books? Well, maybe I am the one to write 16 books on diverse subjects, including Valentine's Day, mastering love, sex, and intimacy. They said, well, why would you even talk about sex? That's not even your field. Well, you know what? I had ED. I struggled with sexual dysfunction. I had clogged arteries, which the canary in the coal mine is clogged arteries to the male organ, which happens to many 20-year-olds. So before my stroke, I had ED. And so I was like, what is going on? So then I researched all the literature because I couldn't satisfy my wife. And I realized that there's a problem, and my whole thinking was wrong. And so when I saw the article Scientific American 37 years ago, before I wrote the book, it came out 37 years later, I said, gosh, I was right. I couldn't believe my own theory, because it was such that 95% of guys think they're great lovers. And the same relationship, 85% of women say guys don't know how to please them. So it's like, come on, guys, wake up. When Ian Kern wrote the book, She Comes First, they weren't kidding. Foreplay is main play. And then the guy can enjoy himself. So it's a mental game. It's a physical game. Women are much more complex than we are. They have different hormonal bounces, and go say, well, she's hormonal. Once a month, she's hormonal. You know what, guys, the testosterone changes every 15 minutes. We're way more hormonal than ladies. And if a guy gets angry, walk away from him for 15 minutes, come back, and you'll notice it's like as if it didn't even happen. in.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
really, guys and
yeah,
gals,
yeah.
let's get together on this. There's a lot of confusion out there, and we're really trying to help you with the hormones, the mind, and love and connection. It's critical, right? The longest lived
Absolutely.
people have love in their life.
Absolutely, 100%. Relationships, connection, intimacy, you name it. Actually, one of the things that I love and I love to tell patients is, because if somebody's older, and I know you've seen this, where a 78-year-old come to you new, so you're talking
Right.
about kind of new, this is a whole new realm to them, a whole new world, okay? And you're talking about hormones and intimacy and things like this, but people live longer. They have huge immune benefits by simply, and it's been proven in science, just by hugging. Okay, and then obviously we know about oxytocin and orgasm and
Yep.
things like this, but it's so impressive. But listen, I want to jump subjects just a little bit, so I apologize because we could talk for hours.
I love
But
it. Let's go.
yeah. But I want to ask you, like if you could say, and I know your research, I know your books, I've read them, I'm on your site, blah blah blah. You are a mentor of mine. So if you said, hey, here's 5 top superfoods, and I tell my patients these, but I want to hear what you say. What would you say would be one of the 5 top superfoods that you think are critical for people to get to age well and be healthy?
Well, to your point, I created something called Slim Plant Pro, and it's 35 whole organic non-GMO ingredients. But number one in concentration in that product is basically yams. Purple and yellow yams, sweet potatoes are probably the best absorbable form of protein because of the derivative of complex carbohydrates. There's a group of islanders that eat sweet potatoes and their leaves. They eat 3% fat, 3% protein, 97% complex carbohydrates. They have no diabetes, no heart disease. Cancer is very rare in their culture. Very, very healthy people. So number one on the list, sweet potatoes. Now, if you're a little overweight, sweet potatoes are pretty dense. They have a high caloric density. So I'm not saying they'll cause you to gain weight, but how you prepare them, you can boil them, you can put them in an air fryer. I actually slice them up and put them in a blender and juice them raw. And then I mix it
Okay.
in with my Slim Plant Pro with beets. That's the number 2 best food, beets, organic beets.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at beets, sweet potatoes, and then probably because of the anti-cancer properties, this might surprise you. This one is mushrooms. I'm enamored with using mushrooms on a daily basis. It helps to seemingly lower PSA. It seems to shrink the prostate. It helps to ameliorate the risk of various forms of cancer. And then I would say cruciferous vegetable. I would say a broccoli sprout. I would say that this has got to be in that top list of 5 or whichever numbers we're going for here, right?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. And I love that you added broccoli sprouts. So I'm a big broccoli guy, cruciferous guy. Love how it helps balance your hormones, helps you detoxify, helps, especially because the world, men too, by the way, we are estrogen dominant. We're an estrogen dominant world. And estrogen dominance, which your book you said is just coming out about this, leads to all bad things: weight gain, cancer, etc. So the diindomethane, the cruciferous stuff, the broccoli sprouts, I love, and I just throw them on. And I know you probably do this too, but I just throw them on any food. I just throw them on top of any food. I'll blend them too, but I just throw them in anything, and they actually they're so fresh tasting and so full of phytonutrients. It's amazing. I love them.
I would probably throw walnuts, flax seeds, or chia seeds. I tend to soak them in the morning. So that's my super whole omega 3, 6, 9. I mean, it's got all the essential fatty acids with the fiber. I'm really not a big fan of the separated like fish oils and things. I'm much more of a fan of the whole complex
The
of
real
fat
food.
as
Yeah,
it
the whole
exists.
complex. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then,
absolutely.
probably, to chase that all together, some of the longest lived, healthiest cultures in the world have something in common. And that's eating some kind of legumes or beans. And so black beans, pinto beans, I get these 15 bean mixtures and I'll put them in a crock pot. And the trick is to get rid of the lectins is cook them for at least 2 or 3 days. I don't just cook them. Now, Rosarita cooks them under a pressure cooker and then they cook them, and that helps to break down. So the test is you go to a Mexican restaurant and the pinto bean, if you will, is too firm and it's going to cause gas. So it's not going to kill you or anything, but it's harder for your body to handle. But if you let it break down slowly at a very low heat in a crock pot. And then I put chilies in there and leeks and onions and, various things and garlic and the aroma in the house is wonderful. And I just scoop out literally glassfuls of that amount, maybe with some basmati rice, which is the least exposed to any kind of metals and so forth. So that's kind of a mix right there.
Love it, love it, love it. So here, before we wrap up, I got to ask you this. Because it's really in vogue right now. I know you'd probably know what I'm going to ask you. I'm actually a fan. So regardless of what you say, I still, but I got to ask you about this. And it's become actually a big interest and passion of mine. But how do you feel, and do you incorporate cold plunge?
I think the amount of cold plunge depends on your outcome. If you jump in a cold body of water, you guys have a lot of it in Michigan. My ocean here is not as warm as my climate. The ocean here is surprisingly cold, and you
Pacific,
shiver.
yeah.
When you shiver, you're actually burning fat, and for hours after, you're burning fat. So you're really stimulating heat shock proteins and various important factors in the body. I think it's a great anti-inflammatory, great healer, and I think the problem is some is good and more is better, and people sit there for a half hour longer. I don't think that's necessary. I really think we're talking minutes to get the body. So at the end of a normal shower, I'll just turn the cold on, and then, okay. And then I'll douse with some Vase water, clean from, the Alps or whatever, because even, if you have a filtration system, you don't know what's coming through the general public water system. So that last little douse, and that's usually a good little chill factor too. So that's kind of how I do it. And then I use a Genesis laser. It's 400 watts. It's the latest breakthrough in laser technology. Most lasers, if you look into them, have maybe 3 or 4 watts, even the great big Hughes laser machines. And lasers have been known to shrink belly fat, reduce wrinkles, stimulate the immune system, shrink brain tumors. These lasers are going to have some fabulous application.
Interesting. I got to talk to you about that on the side, though. I got a patient that I need to pick your brain about then. But
okay.
No, that's exactly what I do. That's exactly what I do. A few minutes. Maybe twice. Personally, I like it kind of post cardio. I'm a big mountain biker, so after something like that, I get less inflammation in that. I do it usually quick, couple minutes, and doing excessive, I think, has got some downside. But I do. What's funny about it is interesting. I think it is a little bit of a challenge, and that also is empowering. That, hey, man, I can put up with this, this cold, because I go like 42 degrees. I actually bought a cold plunge, and I do, and I'll do that for a few minutes. So. But, Dr.
I've done the cryo freeze.
What's that?
Where you get in for like a couple minutes. The cryo freeze, where they freeze you. You got to put a sock on your balls, otherwise they'll fall off.
Yeah. I've heard of this. I've not done that. Yeah.
It's negative 180 degrees, something. It's like crazy cold. It's amazing. It does work.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. Well, listen, I got to wrap it up. I appreciate you, man. God, this has been great. We'll definitely be doing this again and be getting on some other topics, because this is endless we could talk about. Dr. Nick Delgado, PhD, coming from California, hormone expert, exercise nutrition expert, longevity expert. I will see you. I know I'll see you in about 6 weeks in Vegas. So we'll get together, and I really appreciate you and all you do. And I really mean it when I say you have touched so many thousand people just through me, and I'm only one practitioner. So God bless you, man. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. Dr. James Lewerenz, you're amazing. You're a stud. Check out those guns that you got there, man. You can tell you
I got
practice what you preach. It's all good, right? And you got love, connection. You've got all the modalities of your 6 steps. I have kind of organized what I call the 7 steps and Stop Aging Now book.com on Amazon. And that's my latest release book. And then
great
the
book,
next
by the way, I've read that. Great book. Love that book. And it's an easy read, and it's very impactful. So you pick that up, everybody, because it is a wonderful book. But anyway, hey, Dr. Nick, appreciate you, man. I'll see you soon. Thank you so much. Thank you out there for joining us on the Deep Six podcast, where we make an impact on your life, help you thrive and not just survive. We'll see you next time on the Deep Six podcast.